Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Craig. This is where we talk about all things Second Amendment related, firearms policy. We talk about media, government, you name it. We're talking about it here on Coffee with Craig. I want to encourage you guys to please support our sponsors, Sacramento Black Rifle and Sparks Black Rifle. They do this not for the advertising. They support us because they want to see the word get out about the importance of supporting the Second Amendment. So please, help them support us by visiting them online. All you got to do is go to their Instagram or their Facebook pages for Sparks or Sacramento Black Rifle. Check them out. They got a lot of cool stuff. They got some cool swag. Just some good stuff for you to check out. But please support them, like their Facebook pages, like their Instagram pages, and let them know that you appreciate their support of our efforts here at the Firearms Policy Coalition. Okay, moving right along, want to also encourage you, talking about supporting our efforts, please make sure to visit FPCGear.com. That's FPCGear.com. In case you guys are wondering why I keep looking down, just so you know, I am both in front of and behind the camera at the same time. So I'm making all of the magic happen as I am speaking to you. So if I'm looking down, it's not that I'm ignoring you. It's that, well, hey, I assume you want to see the next thing that's coming up. And I'd like to see it before it comes up. So I appreciate your patience and understanding. In any case, please make sure, visit FPCGear.com. Get all sorts of cool T-shirts, all sorts of cool stuff. If you have any recommendations for stuff you'd like to see on a T-shirt, hey, hit us up on our Facebook page. Definitely would love to hear from you about some good, cool ideas, stuff that you would like to wear. But here's the deal. If you propose it, you got to buy one. If you propose it, you got to buy one. That's just kind of how it is, or at least if we come up with it. But anyway, in either case, we've already got some very cool designs there. So go to FPCGear.com. That's FPCGear.com. Let's move right along. So, one of the things that has happened lately that we've seen going on in the political realm seems to be that a good number of folks who who have run for office and claim to be supporters of the Second Amendment, well, let's just be honest, they seem to be buckling on some very, very key and core issues, namely the Second Amendment. They seem to have ignored the fact that that much of their support came from people who support the fundamental right to keep and bear arms, people who believe in civil rights and believe that amongst those civil rights, the Second Amendment is the one that defends all others. And so what I wanted to do was I came across an article in Breitbart by a good friend of mine, Mr. A.W.R. Hawkins, that kind of outlined some 5 actual pieces of legislation that have been things that have been that 5 not pieces of legislation but governors in this country, 5 Republican governors, or at least people who claim to be pro-gun governors, who have introduced or have signed into law legislation that works against our Second Amendment rights. And I figured you guys would want to know about this because some of you live in states that, well, where these folks are governors. And in cases like that, I'm assuming that as the primary season is upon us, you're going to want to maybe see if there is a more, how shall we say, there's a pro-gun option. Because I happen to believe that elections have consequences. And I believe that when people decide that they're going to violate your values, you are obligated to vote your values. So if someone's going to vote and take positions or implement policy that is contrary to your values, then I believe it's vitally important that you send them and others like them a message by voting your values and, in some of these cases, voting them out. So let's take a look at our list, shall we? Let's start at the top of the list. Here we have Republican Governor Rick Scott. Now, Rick Scott is the Republican governor for the state of Florida, and he signed some very interesting legislation recently. One of the first things that he signed was basically it was a $400 million gun control bill. This would control firearm. It would include firearm confiscation orders. We call them gun violence restraining orders, or they call them extreme risk protection orders. In essence, what they do is that they take your rights without due process. You lose your rights, and then you get to go to court. You lose your guns, and then you get to go to court. And then prove that you are not a danger to yourself or others. They don't have to prove that you are. You now are obligated to prove that you are not a danger to yourself or others. It also included waiting periods for long gun purchases and an increase in the minimum purchase age for long guns from 18 to 21. Basically saying that if you are an 18 or a 20-year-old, we can send you to another country with a long gun and tell you to defend our country, but you cannot defend your home with a handgun or a long gun. That was passed by him. And also, it's important to note that he also supported a ban on firearm accessories, specifically referred to. Well, he says they're bump stocks. I've read the legislation. It does not just ban bump stocks. And that's the sad part, is that he didn't even bother to really take the time to read the legislation in order to, at the very least, if he was going to do it, he should have at least made sure that it had a definition that specifically defined bump stocks, even though we don't support bans on bump stocks. But he didn't even make sure that it did that, because he was in such a rush to be the guy who could jump into bed with every town. Gives a whole new meaning to the term political whore. Anyway, moving right along. Next, we have Vermont Governor Phil Scott. Now, let's talk a little bit about Vermont Governor Phil Scott. Now, Vermont has always been known as a state that, even though it's kind of left-leaning, it's always been known as a state that was, decent, at least on guns. Now, what he signed into law was a massive body of gun control laws that included a ban on private gun sales, bump stocks, and then, by the way, neither private sales nor bump stocks actually contributed to what happened in Parkland, which he used as the impetus. Yeah, no bump stocks were used, but that's what he said. That's why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because of Parkland, and yeah, no, none of those were used. He also banned people from owning standard capacity magazines. That's right, the standard capacity magazines. And I say standard capacity, and I know people love to use the term high capacity. They're not high capacity because they're generally the magazines that come with the firearm. And they choose some arbitrary number to make it a low capacity magazine. So anything obviously that's not low must be high, instead of, how about just being standard? Now, keep in mind that Phil Scott, when he ran for governor of Vermont, he said during his campaign that there was no need for more gun control laws. Interesting. As a matter of fact, he said specifically on Vermont Public Radio, I don't believe that we need more gun restrictions in Vermont at this time. I think we should enforce the ones we have. I think we should focus more on safety and gun education, but also addressing the violence problem that is systemic across the country. And I don't have the answer for that, but that's what I'm driving. That's what's driving this frustration, this outrage. So in other words, he believes that we need to deal with violence. He's done nothing to address violence. He believes we need more gun education, but he's introduced absolutely nothing that will bring about more education. He's done none of the things he said we need, but he has implemented the very thing he said we did not need. Hypocrite! I'm sorry. Please excuse me. I'm not feeling a little, have a little hypocrisy. It was kind of funny because as he signed some of these bills, there were actually chants of hypocrite that were going on during the bill signing. Because, well, guess what? When you say one thing and then do another, that's exactly what people are going to accuse you of being. Okay, then we've got this guy. This guy is not Jabba the Hutt. This individual is, his name is Governor Larry Hogan. He is the governor of Maryland, and he signed a bill which would ban bump stocks and implements a law to allow police to confiscate firearms. Now, what are we talking about here? He called it a red flag law, but we're talking about gun violence restraining orders. We're talking about extreme risk protection orders. So we're talking about taking guns from people who have not had their day in court. We're talking about taking away the rights of individuals who, well, because someone said, yeah, I think they're dangerous. And they went to a judge who's not a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, not a mental health worker, and said, and that judge who, by the way, hasn't had to hear any mental health testimony, hasn't gotten a chance to hear from you, yeah, you're going to lose your rights as well. That's the job of the Hut. I mean, sorry again, Mr. Larry Hogan. That's Mr. Larry Hogan and his policy and the thing that he did to implement gun control in his state. Moving right along, we now have, this guy. Okay, so this guy is Governor Bruce Rauner or Rauner. R-A-U-N-E-R. Rauner, Rauner. I don't know, Roadrunner, whatever you want to call him. Anyway, he proposed a law to confiscation laws in his state, as well as tripling the 24-hour period. So he wanted to basically extend the waiting period in his state. He also wants law-abiding citizens to wait 72 hours before allowing them to pick up their guns, store, or take them home. Blah 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 blah. So anyway, the point being is that so he extended the waiting period. Now, interestingly, it was 24 hours. He's extended it to 72 hours. I still don't understand the point behind the waiting period, in particular if you already own a firearm. But that's what he's done. He's proposed laws specifically relating to firearms confiscation. And then you have Republican Governor Mary Fallin. So let's talk about Mary Fallin. Don't you guys really love this little picture of Mary Fallin? She's decided, she's done like a lot of these candidates do. She's decided, I'm going to go someplace and I'm going to pose with a picture of with a gun. I'm going to go somewhere and pose with a gun so that I can talk about how pro-gun I am. Now, what she actually did was actually veto a constitutional carry bill in her state, in Oklahoma. I mean, in Oklahoma, here's a bill that basically would have allowed people to not have to go through all sorts of red tape in order to be able to exercise their constitutional right to bear arms. And she decided, once it made it to her desk, she decided that she was going to veto it. Yeah. Now, mind you, what I will tell you about all of these folks, none of these folks have the same level, the same stature, shall we say, of this one individual who has proposed a number of items and has been very, very visible and vocal. You will definitely recognize him when you see him. You know, the sad part about him is he recently ran for president, and I used to think that he was a nice guy. I used to like him, at least in some areas. I used to think that here's a guy who knew how to work across party lines. And that was before he just, flat out became a Democrat. Rhino, whatever you want to call him, Democrat, rhino, jackass in an elephant suit, whatever you want to call him. This is when he decided that he was going to go full tilt the opposite direction and become fully and wholly anti-gun. And that would be Ohio Governor John Kasich. So let's talk about some of the things. You guys remember, back several months ago, he did a thing on Vice News and a couple other places where he said, I want to have a conversation about guns, and I want to talk about how we're going to ban guns. And, he didn't actually say, I want to talk about how we're going to ban guns, but every proposal that he has come up with have all been about taking away the rights of law-abiding citizens. Let's talk about some of the things he talked about. Gun violence protection orders. Once again, very same thing. We're going to take your guns and you get due process later. He wants to address domestic violence. He wants to make it so that even if you're convicted of a misdemeanor domestic violence, that you lose your gun rights forever. Now, first of all, I just have an issue. If it's domestic violence, why is it a misdemeanor? If you are putting your hands on somebody, if you are physically abusing your spouse or someone else, your significant other, whatever it may be, how is that a misdemeanor? If it is so minor that it is a misdemeanor, it ought to be a felony. If it's so, then maybe it shouldn't. I mean, I don't know. All I'm saying is that maybe it should be a felony. I have an issue with that. He wanted to talk about increasing or expanding background checks, which, there's just some things relating to background checks. And I don't think, at least at the federal, I think that a lot of us don't have an issue with the general concept of background checks. I think a lot of folks don't have a problem with that. The problem is that what they want to do is, number one, they want to use that as a way in which to try and preclude people who shouldn't be precluded from owning firearms. They want to use background checks to actually make it discretionary as to whether or not someone can be approved to be able to own or possess a firearm. I think they also want to use it as a form of registration in order to be able to track what firearms you own and what you've purchased. And I think that those are the main concerns that every proposal pushing for background checks, that's what every single one of them have done, is that they're all about tracking. They're all about knowing what guns allowing the government to track you, know what guns you own, and then decide who should and should not own firearms, as opposed to people being able to exercise their constitutional right in order to be able to own a firearm. I think we all have a problem with that, and I think rightfully so. They're not going to propose anything that is actually going to address the actual issue. So I think that's a bad. They want to get rid of straw man purchases, which, by the way, is interesting because straw man purchases are already illegal. I don't know what the thing is. And by the way, just also so that you know that most guns that are used in crimes, it doesn't matter if you have background checks, because most guns that are used in crimes are obtained illegally. I'll just leave it at that. They want to ban what they call armor-piercing ammunition. Now, the problem is that they don't know what armor-piercing actually means, and they want to do stuff like what San Francisco did, which is actually ban things like hollow points, which, by the way, are not armor-piercing, which are actually safer self-defense rounds. But once again, because they don't know what they're talking about, and hollow points sound scary, that's in fact what they want to do, as well as ban firearm parts, in this particular case, bump stocks. Once again, I just think John Kasich, in many, many areas, including firearms, he's ignorant. And the problem is that he is ignorant and then walks around and talks like he has knowledge. And he walks around and talks like he has knowledge, speaking from ignorance, and then wants to represent a party to which I happen to be a member. And I think that individuals like this, well, quite frankly, they need to go. I think all of them, we'll call them the Gang of Six, all of these individuals need to be put out of office. They need to be shown the door so that we can all know, so that others will know. Look, you can't stand up and claim to support our civil rights and then turn around and violate them, and then seek to push policies which are going to violate them. We are not going to allow you to do that. And if you are going to do that, we are going to hold you accountable. And the number one way in which we have of holding you accountable is to vote your ass out of office. That's pretty much about it. Anyway, folks, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I want to thank you for being a part of the discussion as we talk about firearms and the like. This conversation does not happen without you, doesn't happen without your support. If you look in the description of this video, there's a link where you can go and you can donate specifically to help make sure we can keep Coffee with Craig on the air. So please go do that, or join the Firearms Policy Coalition at joinfpc.org. Join us. Become a member today, or you can just donate. But also, please make sure to like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and suggest that others do the same. Follow us on Facebook and suggest that others do the same. This is how, folks, we build a grassroots army. We build it one share at a time, one like at a time, one subscription at a time, one word at a time, one fight at a time. That's how we do it, and we do it together. Anyway, folks, have fun, stay safe, stay free.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.